Good afternoon, everyone. Talking about moving crop growing zones south 4 to 600 miles. This will be corn and wheat that'll need to shift to south as the grand solar minimum intensifies. We have records of what happened before 320 kilometers south push. And here we are, Kansas wheat crop, 44%, very poor condition, worst since 1986. Cold damage, they're still not even able to report on. Only 3% of the spring wheat planted. That is so far behind the average that it's not even on the radar, really. Corn planting at a snail's pace. Got droughts in Oklahoma, exceptional to severe. And now these crop losses are in play from the grand solar minimum. We really need to start talking about this in our news feeds and media globally. Timeline moving forward for the next 4 years. And the losses are just going to continue from this point forward. And this video is made possible by TrueLeafMarket.com. And Tom Skilling breaks down literally where Chicago's freezing cold temperatures were this year, what grow zone that would be. So what you'd have to do is move everything about 400 to 600 miles south, because currently, as cold as it is in Chicago this year, that's 400 to 600 miles further north up into Canada. We are talking serious shifting in the grow zones here. This article off What's Up With That, I've linked everything below in the description box, along with TrueLeafMarket.com's organic and heirloom seeds for any grow zone on our planet. The Corn Belt, at a minimum 1 degree shift, is going to have to move at least 100 miles south. Now this will still be in a lot of the grow zone, but some of it will go offline, but still there's going to be more corn than wheat available for sure. Now, when we take a look at what's happened in the U.S. in the past, 320 kilometers, so remember you have to multiply by 0.6, so about 200 miles further south. We can take a look at that top line. That's the medieval warming period that the IPCC does not like to talk about, when temperatures around 1,000 years ago were warmer than they are today. This is how we got this climate optimum where all societies were expanding and then they collapsed due to cold that ensued directly after that. Now you can see these lines as they're moving further south. This means that the temperature is getting cooler overall. When we take a look at the limit of the Corn Belt and the little ice age, that's all the further possible it can go north. And that's really a stretch anyway, because just on the periphery there, you're telling me 2 miles over that line you're going to be able to grow corn, or 2 miles to the south of that line? Not really. These are generalizations, but that'll take all of Ontario offline. Corn, soy, everything. That'll take most of Canada completely offline. Canada will have such a reduced grow zone that this would push prices globally just on this alone. And what I mean by that is, let's take a look here. The dotted line is from 1941 to 1970. Now what they've done is they've measured this up, and then if you reduce the temperature 1 degree Celsius cooler, you get squeezed into that dark black zone. And then if we drop the temperature even further, you're going to get reduced down to this little teardrop shape just around the Great Lakes. And they peg it right there. 2 degrees Celsius drop would not allow the crop to ripen before the first frosts. We need to start talking about this. Also, taking a look at the North Pole, it is still minus 18 degrees Celsius up there. And even around 80 degrees north all the way up, it is still 8 Celsius below zero. But the main point up there where it's supposed to be melting, it's minus 18 degrees, so it's not melting. And then this seasonal snow total for the Northern Hemisphere, look how much it blew past the average there. The red is this year. And this is all based on cyclic activity in our sun. We have the solar activity forecast going out, and this is what we should be talking about, because it seems that this is in play right now. And as we march forward into 2020 and 2025, 2030, our crops are going to be less and less from this point forward. But the problem is there are going to be more and more people per year going forward. Somewhere there's going to be this crossover line where there's just definitely not enough food to feed everybody on the planet. Unless we do agriculture in a different way. This is how you're going to thrive and prosper. Taking a look at average drought conditions, you can see it is an undulating wave. It is a natural variable wave. This goes from 1890 on the left side, and look at the super drought during the 30s, the Dust Bowl era. And then we came out of that naturally into wetter conditions, and we're undulating back and forth. And as we enter to this grand solar minimum, You can expect more droughts in areas, flooding in others. Let's take a look at the U.S. Farm Report. This spooked me. I screen grabbed what I thought were the nuggets out of the report in the written form. They have a video that goes with us. We'll look at a few of those slides. Kansas farmer watches wheat get put to the test every year, but 2018 is pushing the limits of what wheat can endure. We're not even into the depths of the grand solar minimum. We're not even into the cool yet, which is going to be coming in 2020, 2021. That's really going to be severe compared to what's today. I mean, what today is just literally light in comparison to what's around the corner. And then the second paragraph down, U.S. Department of Agriculture, latest crop progress, putting 44% of the wheat considered poor to very poor. And as they're trying to talk about repeat from 2007, they are looking at reductions down to 10 bushels per acre. Regardless of the actual acreage that was planted, the amount, 10 bushels per acre? You're kidding me. Now they're starting to see injury symptoms like leaf tip burn. I'll take a look at a couple close-ups here to show what they're getting in the cold damage. And then after the rains in October, they're talking about one of the driest winters on record in Kansas. And it's cold and it's dry. This is not good for crops. Now this is the most startling thing for me. You got the grain marketing specialist from Oklahoma State University talking about a third of the wheat is in a despicable state, using the word despicable twice in the description. So what you're hearing in the media, and they're trying to deflect this and say, oh, everything's fine. Oh, they're going to get it in the ground on time. Nah, this is straight from the U.S. Farm Report this week. Visualization for you here. Kansas wheat crop, 13% is good to excellent. Nice. 44% very poor. And that would be the second worst condition since 1986. Let's take a look at some of the cold damage here. The leaf tip burning and this central stalk destruction are different. Got so cold that the stalks actually froze, or whatever was up so far froze, and when it remelted and thawed, it just split apart. This is the cold damage they're experiencing. Oklahoma, 58% drought, almost 20% exceptional drought. Difficult to grow anything with no water. And look at Kansas, 97% dry conditions persisting. Let's jump over here in that same region, Kansas, Oklahoma. Went from freezing to triple digits in 10 hours. How do you get these kind of temperature flips and not expect our crops to be affected? We're taking a look at AgWeb, the planting news. I've linked everything below so you can follow all these links. And if you go to the latest planting news and you just scroll down, they have the news. I grabbed a couple here from just last week. Historic cold in April might mean lower yields. But wait a minute, the news media is telling us it's going to be great yields this year. What to do while you're waiting to plant? They are so far behind planting. I have some numbers here that are going to shock you in a second. This last one was the reason I grabbed this screen. Corn Belt could freeze as late as June. And they even go into it preparing you for mentally accepting that there might be freezes after June 1st. So let's take a look at the numbers of this spring wheat that's being planted. Again, this comes from the USDA here, U.S. Department of Agriculture, along with this report. Only 3% of the spring wheat is planted. That's well behind the 5-year average. So let's take a look at some real numbers here. The 6 states that have the most in the ground, you got to realize they have the most in the ground. April 22nd of 2017 is on the left side. Right after the word state, you'll get that last year's total. And then the week ending, let's compare it. Go 2 more lines, April 22nd, 2018. So for example, Idaho had 45% of their acreage planted by this time in 2017. When we come over to this year, they had 40%. Now look at Minnesota though. This is where it gets really startling. 13% of the crop was in the ground last year. This year, 0 right now. And if you compare that to the 2013 to 2017 average, they're at 0 and it should be 25%. For example, Idaho should be at 64%, but they're at 40%. And then we go Montana, North Dakota, both at 0, where they should be 24%. South Dakota's at 2% planting, where they should have half in the ground already. Washington State, 35% last year, they should have 67% in by now on the average, but it's only 39%. And when we look at the overall totals of just these 6 states, only 3% of the planting is complete, where it should be 25%. And the news media is telling you that it's okay, that their crops are going to be in the ground and we're going to get really good harvests and that it's not going to push the price and don't worry about it and there's nothing to talk about here. I totally disagree. This is the reason I'm presenting the information. This is dangerous for us. This should be a #1 newsfeed story on every channel across the planet should be talking about the losses. This is not just in the United States. It's in Canada and parts of China. And sure, North Korea, why do you think the talks are started up there? They got 0 crop going in the ground. They're going to have a famine and 20 million people are going to need to migrate outside the borders. We got losses down in South Africa, got losses in Australia, and nobody's talking about it. Let's jump over to corn for a second. Corn planting. Coming under snail's pace, as it's termed from the USDA, weekly crop progress estimates. A snail's pace? This is the government of the United States using a snail's pace in its report? Let's take a look at the snail's pace, shall we? So in these 18 states, we're going to take a look. The exact same chart, but just corn this time. April 22nd, 2017 is on the left, so you can see the approximation of how much was planted at that time versus the 2013 to 2017 average on the right, and then where we are at April 22nd. But again, let's look at Minnesota. 0 in the ground for wheat and now 0 in the ground for corn, and they should be at 13%. Look at the other states as well. The only thing that's above normal is Texas. Everything else is below. And when we look at the amount percentages, there's only 5% of the average that should be compared to 14%. 3 times less than should be in the ground right now. And that's not going to have an impact. And here's the most startling thing about this. When I'm reading the reports for the corn, I was talking about weather in July determines what the corn yield is. But they're planting so late this year, they're determining it and calling it a new normal for planting, which just means they realize that this is a long-term shift in the planting, that we're weeks behind. What we're weeks behind now is going to become the new normal for planting moving forward into 2019, 2020, 2021. It's even going to be way later by that time. Here's the thing though. When they push back the growing season into the hotter weeks, the plants are in an earlier stage of maturity. A 2-week planting delay pushes the timing earlier to a more vulnerable stage, which gives them higher possibility of corn leaf blight and gray leaf spot. These hit the crops before they get to when the ears come out, the reproductive stage. Now with this year, a 2-week delay, no. We're talking 3 weeks to a month now. And finally, I'm going to leave you with a forecast here. This is Valentina Zarkova, Zarkov, Shepard, and Popov's work with the double dynamo on the sun. These magnetic hemispheres and magnetic layers that cancel each other on the sun, that induce and start and intensify our grand solar minimums. It's about electrical effects on our Earth. It's about the moving jet streams brought on by a weakening magnetosphere. This is your forecast right here. It's so easy to discern. Astrophysics gives us the forecast based on prior grand solar minimums. We have just exited the yellow on the left side. Literally this year. When we're moving into the green, there's going to be a double amplification over to the strange weather that we've seen so far in this first quarter moving into the half of the year. Now you have to understand that when we move from 2019 to 20, as we get a little further into the green, the split in these waves mean the more severe and strange weather, cooler conditions on our planet that are going to pervade. So I want you to really look at this chart for a second. And I want you to see right where that yellow transitions into the green. That first arrow with one single dot in it, that's how much change there was between 2017 up to now. So think about 2017 last year, all the strange weather, out of season storms, reduction in crop yield. Okay, that's just one. And now when we come into 2018, it's going to double the amplification from last year. But as we move into the green, this is what I really want you to look at. the split that's going to occur and how quickly it's going to occur and how much effect it's going to have globally on our weather systems and globally on our crop growing regions. We've literally just moved a dot up the scale. And if we talk about it as units of one, okay, we've just doubled, so that was an increase of a unit of one. We still need to increase 6 times more the amount of change that you've seen since 2017 to 2018. It's happening in front of you. You can see it. And if we're having this much difficulty this early with the planting just in the United States and Canada and northern China and North Korea, and the losses in Australia, we need to get a serious discussion going, and it's way overdue, and it's way past time anyway. You're going to be on your own. If the governments are still not talking about this in the news and still pushing global warming, there's an agenda behind it to not get you prepared. Here's the playbook. This is how much time you have left before food prices skyrocket. What happens when those people with the EBT cards or government assistance and food programs can't even cover their basic needs? Then what? That's how expensive the food's going to get. We're talking about a 5 times increase in food coming up at the minimum. But historically, at least back in the 1700s, we saw when the food prices had, even with bad harvest years, quadrupled, and this is in the 1700s. And this is why I brought TrueLeafMarket.com on as one of my sponsors, because we and you and us and me and everyone is going to need to know how to grow their own food again. This is a no BS assessment. We are out of time. You really, really, really need to start growing anything you can to practice right now, because food prices are going to increase from this point forward, and they're not coming back down possibly until 2024 or 2025. And as the sun tries to restart its magnetic field, and then so does our magnetosphere try to recompress, and then just as quickly within 2 years it goes back out of phase again. Not really sure what's going to happen with the weather, but anyway, your food is absolutely going to increase in price starting right now. Look at the futures markets. Everything's up 18, 19, 21%. It's all up. Even fish food's up like 16%. Thanks for watching. I hope this information can help you enrich your lives, keep you safe, prosperous, and just so you can see the future a little more clearly, because the governments and the mainstream media of our world are definitely not doing this at all.